today's senior speeches. Our first speaker today is Caleb Smith, and Caleb will be introduced by his mother, Mary Beth Smith.
Good morning. As she mentioned, my name is Mary Beth Smith, and I am Caleb's mom. And I'm happy to be standing here in front of you, and I'd like to remind my husband the reason I'm standing here is because of that coin toss Caleb did when he was making his decision on which one of us would be here. So, you're welcome, babe. As I began to kind of think through and decide what I was going to say, I decided to do a little ode to Caleb, similar to his senior comments at his senior nights for cross country and for swim. For those of you who were there, you may remember that he gave a lot of thanks. He thanked his parents, his brother, his grandparents, his extended family, Jasmine the dog, his neighbors, his teammates, James Gurley. He also thanked Mr. Staten, the teachers, his coaches, the Amazon driver for on-time deliveries, the guy that sold him his track shoes, the internet for helping him find that quote that he used, and a variety of people. So to keep with that theme, I decided I needed to thank Caleb. So I want to just say, thank you, Caleb, for being the kind, sweet, compassionate, thoughtful, charming, and witty young man that you are. So without further ado, I am proud to introduce my son, Caleb Smith.
Thanks, Mom. As spring break looms over our collective unconscious, I imagine everyone's minds couldn't be farther from senior speeches. Please, students, I beg, try and resist the instinctual desire to pass out, probably brought on by too few hours of sleep and a little bit too much soda and candy. And please, teachers, I beg, try and resist the equally instinctual desire to pass out, probably brought upon by, for some, decades of listening to senior speeches. As I look upon rows and rows of people, my mind acutely focuses on so many unfamiliar faces. We're conditioned to be sensitive towards any new information, and I felt that conditioning ring true especially during my early years at collegiate. My only experiences with tons of transitory seniors was through what they said at this podium. Many speeches are selflessly dedicated to causes the author supports. Many speeches, barely hitting the 5-minute mark, were very clearly written as nothing more than a graduation requirement, and many speeches simply fail to capture the attention of the audience. In this speech, I hope to share a little bit about who I am through how I came into this world. It was the 25th of December, 2005, in the heart of Mississippi. A passing mule had kicked down one of the brick walls of the Olive Branch Hospital maternity wing and started running through its long, straight halls. He slammed his neck on the walls and brayed and neighed as he ran. The alien nature of freedom made his eyes bug out and whirl. The hospital staff, dressed in dispassionate blue and white, hollered as they followed the beast. They wouldn't stop his crazed sprint because this was no ordinary mule. The night before, a drunk driver crashed into the stable of a rare horse breeder in Natchez. Among the escaped horses was a giant, vividly pale son of a wild donkey and rare cream draft. Panicked and totally unsure what to do with newfound freedom, he took the 200-mile journey from Natchez to Olive Branch on the side of the I-22 before trotting through the open doors of the local hospital. In the midst of his aimless struggle, the mule didn't slow until a unique sound brought it to a halt. See, a small baby boy had just been born, and he hadn't coped well with entering this world. He cried and he cried and he cried, unrelenting to his mother's desperate attempts to silence him and unaware of the danger this giant beast posed. In what seemed to be a moment of true clarity, the swamp horse perked its head up as it heard the child's cries and slowly walked into the room where the baby had been born. The mule dropped its head as it entered the quaint delivery room and caused the mother to begin screaming. Suddenly possessed by an inhuman focus, the baby placed his finger to his mother's lips and placed his attention to the animal. Calm and collected, like a grown man in a baby's body, he reached out towards the muzzle of the mule. With one hand, he fiercely directed the chin of the almost horse towards direct eye contact, while gently but compassionately stroking its muzzle. The animal's heart rate quickly slowed, and its eyelids began to flutter. Its knees shook, about to buckle. Finally, realizing its exhaustion, the swamp horse quickly collapsed onto the cold hospital floor. Shaking also, in traumatic shock, the boy's mother let out a quiet, breathless gasp and fainted. Soon, panting hospital staff arrived to a truly confusing scene. A young woman, her newborn infant, and a pale mule were all sleeping soundly in the same hospital bed. They found the boy's newly made birth certificate and discovered his name to be Caleb Hessatius Grinch Velacruz Smith. I'm sorry, but this is a tall tale. One to entertain and highlight some things about me. Let me explain. My love of holidays, and especially Santa Claus, was reflected in my birthday. My Mississippi upbringing was reflected in the location of the story. My loudness in everything I do was reflected in how loud I cried. My tendency to spring into action at the drop of a hat was reflected in the speed of my reaction to the appearance of the swamp horse. And my natural connection with animals was reflected in my dealings with that horse. This story doesn't focus on my negative traits, how I love too much, how I work too hard, and ultimately how I'm willing to whittle myself down to the bone in service of a powerful vision. In this yarn, I reflected my own traits very heavily, but ignored what may be unappealing about myself. I'm sure many people in this room, especially those who know me personally, are wondering what I'm talking about. To put it nicely, you're probably wondering how I think these things about myself. I'm not from Mississippi, I'm not loud in everything I do, and I don't have a particular connection with animals. I even offered a little self-promotion by sharing negative traits that could easily be seen as positive ones. Basically, everything I've said to this point has been a lie. In reality, I'm usually pretty shy, anxious, and quick to give up on something. I definitely was not up to the challenge of a senior speech in the first place. However, this tale does capture certain truths about me. I'm a little creative and out of the box. My dad once told me I think of the hardest way to do something first. I like an underdog story and anything unconventional. Ultimately, my biggest hope with this speech was to get it done and explore the idea that we can spin stories to suit our ideas of ourselves. And I hope I delivered a speech that didn't make anyone pass out. Thank you. Have a good one, everybody.
Our second speaker today is Ella McGuire, and Ella will be introduced by her brother Cole.
Hello. My sister Ella is an interesting character, to say the least. For most of my life, her head has been in a book. In fact, Ella might be one of the only people I know that if the house was burning down and she was reading, she would have no clue what was going on. But despite her crippling addiction to reading books, she has been an amazing sister. Whoa. Yikes. Ever since I was little, I have tried to annoy my sister to a point of no return, whether it was spying on her and then stealing half her Halloween candy, or blasting Metallica at full blast. But through all my attempts to drive my sister crazy, she has remained a calm and responsible sister. I would like to share a story from when me and my sister were young. When I was younger, I used to be afraid of the dark, and like most children, and one night I was petrified for some reason. Taking note of this, my sister turns on a flashlight and makes shadow puppets with funny stories with them. Another of my favorite stories was when I was in 6th or 7th grade. My family decided to go camping and kayaking on a river. At the end of the kayaking trip, there was this rock. This rock was a good 20 to 30 feet up in the air. While everyone was jumping off the rock into the water, I was standing off to the side, shaking my boots due to the fear of falling. This is when my sister notices this and walks over to me and offers to jump with me. Both these stories capture the caringness and compassion of my sister, Ella, strongly shows not only at home, but at school, in sports, and to the public. Now, without further ado, I am proud to introduce my best friend, role model, and most importantly, my sister, Ella McGuire.
I'm just gonna have to hold it, I think. Yeah.
Okay, hold it. I'll see if I can get it up.
Okay, good morning, everyone. All right. My favorite basketball player of all time is Victor Oladipo. Drafted second overall by the Orlando Magic in 2013, he was known in the NBA for his athleticism and defense. I knew him as one of my basketball coaches at the camp I attended for 3 summers at IU. These camps were coached by the men's basketball team, and I would usually spend the week at my grandparents' house in Bloomington. Indiana University has always been a big part of my life. My parents, my 3 aunts, my uncle, my 4 grandparents, and my great-grandparents all attended IU. I spent my whole life cheering on the basketball team at Assembly Hall and watching silently in disappointment as the football team loses at Memorial Stadium. When I was 6, I briefly lost my hearing after Christian Watford hit the buzzer beater over #1 Kentucky and my mom lost her mind. A quick shout out to any UK and U of L fans in the audience, we own both of your teams. I've been in Assembly Hall for court storms after beating Purdue, and I've rocked at least 2 pairs of candy-striped overalls. I'm the biggest fan of my family by far, which means that I'll always defend IU. Usually, this means I'm stuck in a vicious cycle of getting my hopes up and watching them get completely obliterated by Nebraska or worse, Rutgers. Being an IU fan is a test of fortitude, optimism, and being able to pick yourself back up. Nothing challenges my patience quite like Indiana sports do. And as a Pittsburgh Steelers fan as well, I'm partially convinced that I'm cursed to always support mediocre teams. However, even if IU never gets that 6th banner or Russell Wilson torpedoes the Steelers franchise, I'll still be a fan. Last year, I was lucky enough to have access to a ticket for any IU basketball game that I can make it to. Usually, I would drive up with my grandparents, Juju and Bill, and then my other grandpa, Papa, and I would sit and watch the game together. Papa is over 6 feet tall, bald, quiet, and occasionally absent-minded. Nothing drives my grandma crazier than when he wanders off and we have to fetch him. Papa is also an ideal person to watch a basketball game with, and over the past 2 years, we've gotten our routine down perfectly. After finding our seats in Section J, we sit and go through our pregame analysis. Our questions usually revolve around Indiana's ability, or rather lack thereof, to make free throws with any consistency. After we discuss the hopelessness of that situation, we commit to being proper fans. From then on, only words of encouragement are allowed, mostly to offset the negativity of every other fan in the surrounding area. Once the game begins, the conversation ends. It's time to focus, and usually the students use enough expletives that we don't really need to. If a player makes a particularly good pass, I will say, "That was a great pass," and my grandpa will nod his head to agree. If there's a bad call, I'll say, "Terrible call." My grandpa will nod his head to agree. This is how most of our interactions go for the rest of the game, with some sporadic applause and the occasional high five. We always stay until the last second, even if we're getting blown out, or on the rare occasion, winning a game by more than 10 points. While watching these games is always a fun experience, it's the connections that I form through them that mean more to me. It doesn't quite count as a connection, but it was pretty awesome having my favorite basketball player ever lift me up to dunk when I was 6. I even feel like I form connections with the women who sit in front of me at games because I can never avoid photobombing their selfies. Mostly though, it's the deeper relationships that I form with my family. Driving up to the games with Juju and Bill always involves laughter, snacks, and my private contemplations about whether they should still legally be allowed on the roads. Our drives are a time to catch up and gossip about neighbors and our favorite TV shows. If I stay the night in Bloomington after a game, I get to have dinner with my other grandparents, and sometimes I get to beat them at some kind of board game. And at the games, I get to spend time with Papa. Occasionally he asks about school and my life in Louisville, but usually we just talk basketball. From him, I've learned about the history of the program, the school, stats, and how a single head nod can have as much power as any word. IU basketball has brought many feelings of disappointment, anger, and confusion, but it's also brought joy, excitement, and closer relationships. There's a disproportionate relationship between the strength of my connections with my family and Indiana's 3-point percentage. Our three-point percentage is one of the worst in the country, to clarify. The men's, our women's team has no problem making shots that Division I Big Ten basketball players should be capable of. As we've gone from being simply bad at three-point shots to they must be closing their eyes when they shoot bad over the last 8 years or so, I've bonded with my grandparents. Some of that bond has formed from long conversations over a possible curse on every shooting guard that steps foot in Assembly Hall, but it's expanded to so much more. I've always known that I had my grandparents in my corner, but I've realized that I can pick up the phone, call, and trigger my grandma's obnoxiously loud ringtone at any time to discuss more than just sports. It would make my grandparents extremely happy to end this speech by announcing that I'll be attending IU next year, but unfortunately I won't be the one to continue the family tradition. However, I can promise that no matter where I go, I'll be in my red and white stripes, cheering the Hoosiers on, texting my pregame and postgame analysis to my grandpa, and most likely receiving a single thumbs up emoji in return. Thank you.
This thing snap.
Hey, Ben Norton, here we go.
Okay. Our third speaker today is Ben Norton, and Ben will be introduced by his mentor and JV golf coach, Ed Conway.
At least I didn't break the mic. It is again my pleasure to have, or it's my honor, to have Ben select me. It's very tough. Wow. I love these guys. To have Ben Norton select me to introduce him for his senior speech. I am Coach Ed of the JV golf team. I have known Ben all 4 years since he joined the golf team as a freshman. The things I like most about Ben are his versatility and his stick-to-itiveness. In fact, I believe he's only missed maybe 1 or 2 matches in his entire 4 years. That's very good. During his time at collegiate, his versatility has been shown by his violin playing and his recent part in the stage show Mamma Mia, which I had planned to attend, but my wife and I were in Mexico. We had an early spring break. I also hear that Ben is pretty good academically. And he was also a member of the basketball team. I also hear that I know additionally, one of the things that I have is Mott's gummies and Welch's gummies, which I pass out consistently because it takes a lot of the stress away from the matches. And Ben, you have been my magic for 4 years. I've additionally appreciated Ben's help with all of our new players, especially Dixon, who is a left-hander in a right-handed world. Really. One time I got stuck in the golf cart on a hill at Cherokee Golf Course. And Ben and Cole Thompson at the time rescued me. Brought me back to the cart path. Wow. Ben, I don't know who your little buddy is, but he couldn't have asked for a better young man with your skills and your quality. To all of his classmates that are assembled here today, it is my pleasure to introduce to you Ben Norton.
I got some magic with me to take my mind off the speech. That's big. To all the freshmen in the room, get involved. To all the sophomores, enjoy school before it gets stressful. To all the juniors, appreciate senior year while it lasts, so on. Year after year, we experience that exact trope of an all-wise senior dropping their departing wisdom upon the rest of the high school. While it may be a little cliche, it does make sense. Many of my fellow seniors and seniors from years past have had plenty of life experience, tidbits, and insight to dish out. However, I can promise with 100% certainty that none of you want advice from me. I spend an ungodly amount of time on schoolwork. I'm constantly working towards and stressing over everything. I endure a sleep schedule that is at best confusing and at worst unhuman. And as those of you who have ever attended a Titan basketball game may know, I'm not actually good at any of the sports I play. That last one took me a long time to come to terms with. But really, none of you want my advice. However, just because I'm unqualified to give you any of my advice does not mean I'm unqualified to give you advice at all. So, instead of my advice, today I'll be sharing advice with you from just about the greatest person I could think to offer some words of wisdom. My JV golf coach of 4 years, I told you I wasn't good at any of the sports I play, Ed Conway. Now, the thing about Coach Ed is he gives you advice before you even meet him. Let me explain. As you approach Ed, or even if you don't, Ed offers up his hand to shake and tells you, Ed Conway, nice to meet you, all right. Ed gives his first piece of advice through his example. His iconic handshake is telling us to meet as many people as we can. Introduce yourself, make new friends. Ed will even introduce himself if you have met him before, so long as he's only seen you once or twice, just to be sure he's got the name down. The lesson to learn here, don't be embarrassed. Don't be afraid to introduce yourself a second time, because you never know. The first introduction might not have been enough. Now, after I met Ed for the first time and he saw me swing a few irons, I received 2 of the best tidbits Ed has to offer. Number 1 on this list, and maybe his most famous, is wow, really wow, just wow, haha, all right. We got this one in the intro a little bit too. This one might be a little harder for those of you who haven't golfed with Ed to interpret, so once again, I'll help you out. What Ed is saying is, find awe and wonder in everything. Even a 5-foot, 15-year-old curly-headed kid shanking his driver into the woods 5 times in a row. Now, when Ed breaks out his wow, really wow line, which I encourage you to ask Will, Andrew, Reese, Ben Abbott, Dixon, anyone, is very often, Ed never says these words in a negative way. Usually it's not even in response to anything negative. Sometimes it's not even in response to anything at all. Coach Ed just finds the wow in everything, and I think that's just one more good idea we can take from him. Second on his list of responses to my misses on the golf course, it has to be trimmed a little bit for reasons I cannot disclose, but I'll leave some blanks there and you can do the detective work. As I swing and miss yet again into the bushes on Cherokee's 5th hole, Ed calls out to me, not necessarily mad or angry, "You had all this green and you hit it in the blank blank." If you're unsure what to put in those blanks, again, I'll refer you to my former JV golf teammates. Genuinely though, what Ed was trying to tell me was, you have a simple task. Don't overcomplicate, don't overthink it, get out of your head, just do it. And he's right. When I'm golfing with my friends on the weekend at Standard, I always shoot better than when I'm stressing out about scoring well in a tournament. We all overthink, we all overanalyze, we all hit the ball in the shrubs when the green is flat, 30 yards across and right in front of our face. Ed says, just calm down, do the simple task, or in his words, you had all this green and you hit it in the blank blank. Coach Ed's next piece of advice comes in the form of a story from this year's season. I promise I'll try to do it justice. As we suit up to play a match against South Oldham, a pretty hefty fella steps up onto the tee box. While I'm making my way down to the first hole, Ed informs me that this player is one of the best offensive linemen in all of Kentucky. A little surprised, I hung on to the information, wanting to confirm it with my teammates after the match. After some discussion, I realized he had independently given this fun fact to every player on our team. A little suspicious, we took to finding out for ourselves. Our hefty friend from South Oldham had never touched a football field in his life. Now, if you've learned anything from my speech so far, it should be that behind Coach Ed's words, there is always a lesson. And without fail, there's one here too. This time, it's always assume the best in people. If someone's big but not that great at golf, it's probably because golf isn't their main sport. They may very well be the best offensive tackle in all of Kentucky. You never know. As a side note, when I addressed Coach Ed with our newfound fact-checking to his fun narrative, I was met with an, oh really, wow, all right, really, There's that awe again. Due to time, my semifinal piece of related advice is pretty short, but I promise it's equally as good. Let me set the scene. It's the 9th hole of Seneca, and Will Hellman and I are somehow beating our opponent from Eastern. In the middle of our opponent's silent backswing, Coach Ed whizzes, and I mean whizzes by, doing at least 40 on his golf cart. As our opponent lifts his club off the ground, all you can hear is the vroom of Ed's golf cart pushing 40, combined with his loud, jolly exclamation of, "Game's over, we already won!" Right in the middle of his backswing. Safe to say he did not hit a good shot. What's there to learn from this one? Actually, I'm not sure. Maybe don't worry about what other people think of you. Maybe have confidence. Maybe take pride in winning. Maybe try doing 40 in a golf cart. Maybe it's just a funny story that I wanted to include. We'll never know. Ed's final piece of advice is quite possibly his best. A good way to know you're not playing well on a given day is when Ed breaks out the line, "Well, it's just a game," followed by "There are 2 things in life that really matter. Your education, your family, and what you do with your life." Without saying, see, he agrees. Without saying it directly, Ed is telling us that JV golf doesn't matter, and he's right. I can get worked up trying to be good at everything that I do, and that just isn't realistic. So, Ed says don't worry about it. Have fun, appreciate the game, but don't stress over it, because ultimately, all that matters is your education, your family, and what you do with your life. And a bad JV golf match simply won't throw any of that off. As funny as Ed is, there really is sincere meaning behind all of his sayings, mannerisms, and completely made up stories about offensive tackles. While I might not be able to give you worthwhile advice myself, I hope some of Coach Ed's words of wisdom will stick with you the way they have with me. Thank you.